Every Wednesday, we're coming at you with Want to Know Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please leave a comment. Let us know what you want to hear for next week's Want to Know Wednesday. We use the comments, we use the questions you guys leave as for future videos and for future content. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Talking a little bit about the type of product that we've been buying over the last couple years. When we first kind of got started, everything we were buying was like built in the 70s, 80s, and obviously it was pretty heavy value add type product. And something that I noticed around COVID was obviously the supply chain, obviously labor issues, and just it was hard to get anything done. And so what we actually started doing was I shifted my mindset a little bit earlier. There's other groups doing this now. I think I was a little bit more on the front of it, at least here in Wisconsin. And in my mind, people thought I was overpaying for some of the deals that we've bought in the last 2 or 3 years. But when I looked at it, is we were really only paying like $15,000 to $20,000 more per door to have a newer asset that was only 15 years old as opposed to 40 years old. And we were going to have a lot less capital expenditures to do. We weren't going to have to put in $15,000 per unit like some of the previous properties that we have bought. Plus, during those COVID times, like I talked about the labor shortages and everything, things that used to take 2 weeks or 4 weeks to do now take 2 times or 3 times as long. So we were not only going to have the cost, but also that added time, which is lost money as well. We weren't going to have those issues buying the type of assets that we've been buying. I also looked at it and like, okay, people are selling their homes. They're wanting something that still kind of feels homey. So about 80% of what we've bought over the last 2 or 3 years has been townhome style type living, which feels, they're bigger units and they're direct access, meaning people have attached garages or they walk right up to their own door. They don't have to walk through a common area hallway, which means it feels more like home, right? And so that's been a home run for us, that type of product over the last 2 or 3 years. Paying that $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 more per door versus stuff that's older and stuff that needs a lot more work. It's been worth it to us because we've still been buying them cash flow positive day one. We don't have the work to do. And part of our target as well has been properties that the previous ownership, they weren't asset managers or they just weren't being aggressive with rents. They weren't putting them to market. So they'd missed out on the last 3 years or the last 5 years or the last 7 or 10 years of rental increases. So a lot of the things that we bought, not only was there less work to do, where we're spending $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 per unit, and that includes all the exterior stuff, the common area stuff, the in-unit stuff. So not only are we spending less per door to upgrade and improve the property, we don't have the headache of the logistics and getting contractors through and all that stuff. On top of that, we're able to only spend that $2,000 to $3,000 per unit, but still be able to raise rents 10%, 15%. I mean, some of the properties that we're picking up, we're able to raise rents 40 to 55%, and even after that rental increase, we're still more competitive than similar product in the area. So 80%, 85, 90% at some of these properties of the people are renewing at those higher rental levels because it's still a more competitive price than the area. So that's been a very typical thing for us to do. And so the point of this Want to Know Wednesday is to really think about as things change, like things are always changing in the economy, right? And now that I've been doing this for 10 years, I've kind of almost seen a full cycle go. And a lot of the things that I kind of thought about and prepped for, and a lot of the things that I kind of changed and adapted that I started to do 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago have really paid off at this point right now, just with where we're at with higher rates, with, again, labor shortages, with costs of cabinets and flooring and paint and all that stuff going up. A lot of these decisions that we made have really, really paid off. So don't back yourself into a corner and don't think everything is always going to be the same forever. We had to adapt. We had to adapt from buying things that were built in the 60s, 70s, and even early 80s to buying things that were built in the late 80s, 90s, 2000s that have a little bit of a different type of business plan that you need to keep in mind and be aware of. This also goes to the point of don't just look at one metric when you're buying deals, right? And so I'll go back to people thought I was overpaying for deals a couple years ago because they only looked at what I was paying per unit or per door that we bought, right? So if I was paying, if we bought, let's just use easy math, if I paid $100,000 per unit and it was 10 units, it was $1 million purchase price, right? That's what per unit means, per door means, right? And so when I was paying, we bought a deal that paid like $160 per door, $180 per door. We've bought anywhere from $40,000 per unit up to almost $200,000 per unit over the last 10 years. And some of these products, people were looking at me like, man, how are you? But I kind of recognized what was coming. I already felt the issues we had in some of the 70s product in getting things done. And I'm like, why am I going to keep banging my head against a wall? Things are changing, so I therefore need to change and evolve. right? There's some core things that you always need to be able to work smart, work hard, right? Those things don't change. You always need to pursue excellence and think big. Those things don't change. You always need to take massive action. Doesn't change. But sometimes your strategy needs to change. And our strategy has changed over the last 2 or 3 years because of what we were coming into and what's going on now. And our strategy is starting to evolve a little bit again, and it's going to be different 3 years from now than it is right now. And it's going to be different 10 years from now than it is right now. So don't back yourself into a corner. Don't think just because something has been one way for the last 3 years, it's not going to be the same way 3 years from now or 10 years from now. Don't think it's always going to be the same. Realize that things are always evolving, things are always changing, and you need to be able to bend and change your strategy, your business model to that environment so that you can have success. You know, nothing's ever easy, but with what we do is we try to bend with the universe, bend with the macro economy so that we can permeate through all the rough patches, all the issues that are going on, and ultimately permeate through the things that are that give us less resistance. If we would have kept buying the 70s product, we would have just had this huge resistance to progress, right? So instead, by changing our business model, we've been able to get to $300 million of assets under management. We've been able to, raise $35 million this year. If we didn't change our business plan, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't be able to pick off these deals, these great deals that we've picked off. So you got to keep your head on a swivel. You got to kind of know what's going on in the world without the world getting too into you and bringing you down and being depressed while moving forward. Adapt, change. Thanks for joining us for this Wanna Know Wednesday.